live to you from St. Augustine Beach, Florida. It's time for RecruiterCast Live. In today's talent landscape, you need to be one step ahead of your competition, whether you're a recruiter, hiring manager, or candidate. Join Dave Webb, lifelong entrepreneur, big data expert, and staffing aficionado, as he chats with guests about everything recruiting. From entrepreneurial journeys to job descriptions to the tech that will make you land top talent, if you want to learn about the latest trends, this is the podcast for you. And now, here's your host, Dave Webb. Let's talk recruiting.
Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to RecruiterCast Live. I'm your host, David Webb, and today is a very exciting episode because we have a new guest with us, our first-time guest, rather, and here for episode 61, and that is Mike Seidle from WorkHere. How you doing, Mike?
Pretty good. How are you doing?
Hey,
it's great to be here.
I'm doing great, and we're really glad to have you. And before we get into all of the good recruiting nuggets that we have to share with the audience, I like to just do a couple of little housekeeping things. Those longtime listeners are familiar with the routine here, but this is episode 61. We are live. It is April 22nd, 2021 at 1 p.m. Eastern. So if you are enjoying this podcast on your audio device, it's not live. And but we do appreciate you listening and downloading. Which reminds me, we are a podcast. We broadcast the recordings live just to get a different perspective on the conversations and to allow people to watch us live. So don't forget to subscribe, like, and set reminders on all of your favorite podcasting platforms. We do broadcast live on Twitter, YouTube, Twitch, and Facebook. And you can catch the podcast after we publish it today, late this afternoon or early tomorrow on Apple, Spotify, Stitcher, YouTube, Google Play Store, or any major platform that pulls from syndication program that we use. So also we are at RecruiterCast on all the major platforms. So please follow us and like what we're talking about and engage with us on all the social platforms like Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. That's a mouthful. So now that that's out of the way, Mike, as I mentioned in the intro, you are the CTO and co-founder of WorkHere. And before we kind of jump into our topics for the day, which is really kind of the augmented intelligence aspect of AI and engaging with candidates. Tell us a little bit about yourself and the company that you work for and have co-founded.
Yeah, so I'll start with me. I'm an entrepreneur. I've been, this is the sixth company that I've been a part of starting. Absolutely love creating software and building companies around that software. So I think you and I kind of have a little of that in common.
Yep.
From the company standpoint, we started WorkHere back in 2015, and our whole idea, it was 2015. Let's, if you roll back the clock there, if you're a startup, you probably were making a mobile app. That's what we were doing. The product we created was WorkHere. It was literally a job finder app that was kind of Yelp for jobs. We ran that for up till February of last year when COVID hit. And when COVID hit, it actually wiped out 85% of our revenue. And we kind of rethought life, the universe, and everything, refocused, and brought a whole new product to market. We had a little part of our business doing chat for some of our customers that wanted to engage with candidates faster. And we decided to bet the farm on it and built a whole new platform that would allow us to do live human-to-human chat very, very quickly whenever somebody applied for a job. So think if somebody applies on Indeed, they get a text message a few seconds later and they answer the text message. And if they say yes to that message, they get to talk to a live person and get their questions answered, get to go through and be screened. And then if they get through that initial conversation, it usually leads to a scheduled interview with a recruiter or a hiring manager at that company. And we're starting to extend our functionality past just that initial conversation. So we're working on adding voice and video to it.
Well, congratulations on the COVID pivot that I think we all either did or had to consider at some point. And that's great news that even after losing that much of your revenue, you guys have been able to not only stay in business, but grow. That says a lot about your leadership team there.
Well, the best part with the pivot that we made, we brought the product to market in late November, early December last year.
Okay.
And just in the few months we've had into this year, we're in April now, we've already passed up 2019 and 2020's revenue. So
Nice.
We've already beat 2 years of our history with the new product, and things are growing really quickly. So we think we're doing something that really fits into the market right now. And I'm really excited that we're going to get to talk about a lot of the dynamics in the market that make what we're doing matter.
Yeah, me too. And there's nothing like the market validating what you're doing. And that kind of brings me to my first question. The market's crazy right now, right? I mean, there's so many businesses with help wanted signs out in front of their establishments right now. And it would be a whole nother show to talk about why people are using help wanted ads versus applicant tracking systems. I obviously have a little bit of a skin in that game. And I've tried to make the case before, but especially here in the hospitality industry where I'm at, it seems like, and others too, like I hear from people in, let's see, the really recruiting jobs, right? Staffing agencies are having trouble hiring recruiters. They need the recruiters because all of their customers are short staffed and they're trying to hire people. So there's this kind of like cascade of a shortage of talent right now, or should I say talent willing to work at the market rates, right? We'll come back to that one, but let's just talk about how important each engagement, each job application is to a company right now, and what kind of a differentiator a human interaction via chat could be. What kind of research have you guys done and to kind of support this decision?
Well, the first reason we started doing chat, 2 years ago when we got a little bit into the business, was that we were seeing an awful lot of people bouncing out of the traditional job board apply, go into the ATS, a week later, somebody reaches out. That flow wasn't working for some of our customers and they wanted to do something faster. And then as we've done more and more chat, what we've learned is the faster that a candidate gets a response to a job application or a quick apply, the more likely you are to A, engage with that candidate, and B, get to a successful hiring outcome. So we see typically off a major job board, like Indeed or ZipRecruiter, we see engagement rates around 60 to 70% when we chat. And we see an interesting thing in our conversations, in that the longer that person waits between when they apply for the job and when they get to talk to a person, we start to see a little downtrend in the number of people that make it to that successful hiring interaction at 81 seconds. So the faster you reply to a candidate, and it is very fast, is really what the standard is, the more likely you are to engage with people. And that doesn't even speak to the quality of the talent. And one of the things that in this market that a lot of employers and recruiters really miss is that the best candidates go really fast. The people you really want to hire are the ones that are going to get hired by somebody else if you make them wait. And so what we're seeing in our business is that a lot of the customers coming to us want to go faster. And we definitely see speed as being the thing that really makes the difference in the hiring outcome.
That makes a lot of sense. So companies before and after they use the chat engagement. Okay, I'm using the same word to mean a lot of things. So I'll try to clarify this a little bit. Okay. So there's the engagement of your chat staff with the applicant. And then there's what we consider like the traditional engagement of the applicant with the job, which is that they actually fill out the application and click the apply button. Right. So does your team chat with the applicants as they're browsing the job and before they apply, or after they apply?
We actually do a little of both. Most of our customers, 100% of our customers use us to chat when an apply happens. So that's all the time. And we have some customers where we do pre-apply conversations. And the reason we do that is really to sell people on actually finishing the application. There's an awful lot of pretty high quality candidates that are out there that just don't finish the apply process for whatever reason.
That's true. And it's directly correlated to how long the application is. We've definitely found that to be true. So the reason why there is that the applicants feel like they're going to waste a lot of time on a long form and they're never going to hear from somebody. So I can see the value in this in an industry where there's maybe a lot of oversight or compliance that has to be adhered to, and applications are written by lawyers instead of recruiters. They're several pages long, and you guys can actually coax the applicant into, hey, this is real. If you spend the time doing all these things, there will be further engagement with other humans, and you're not just wasting your time. That has to be a positive.
It really makes a big difference. And you think about this, if you apply at 3 different companies and one of them gets back to you right away and is there to help you and answer your questions and make sure that you do successfully get through the application. And the other 2 companies send you an email, and a week later, maybe you get a phone call from a recruiter. Which one of those companies is sending the signal that they're interested in you and care about you, and which are the 2 that are probably previewing what your employment experience will be like?
Yeah, and this courtship, right? This attraction of the talent is not a new problem. I think it's magnified right now because of the shortage of people applying to jobs. But this has been a differentiator for companies, especially in high paying, high valued, hard to find positions for a long time.
Yeah, it's been that way in the high value jobs for a long time. But right now, what we're seeing is even at the lower end of the wage scale, we're seeing engagement and really showing people that you care, having a little bit of empathy is making an incredible amount of difference for filling positions. You go back to hospitality. There's a lot of jobs in hospitality that don't pay well. We're doing a ton of business in manufacturing, and we're doing a lot with warehousing right now. And a lot of what it comes down to is just giving people an immediate human to human experience instead of, talk to the bot or talk to our website. Don't talk to us. And so I think really right now, the way the world is, you really do stand out if you're providing that early on human to human experience. And I think it's a huge competitive advantage that probably extends further down the hiring process than you might think.
I want to say about a year ago, we were talking on the show about the unemployment rate being as high as it was, right? Because we're talking April 2020.
Oh yeah.
Everyone had realized the pandemic wasn't going away in 6 weeks. The lockdown had been extended, like the national lockdown advice had been extended another month or so. People started laying off because they didn't know when things were going to be as they were pre-pandemic. And what we saw in the ATS market was companies were saying, hey, we have a lot more applications than we're used to having right now, because as people got laid off, there was no stimulus in sight. Unemployment was kind of up in the air how everything was going to work. I don't think, I could be wrong, so don't yell at me, everybody out there, but I don't know if PPP had been passed yet. If it had, it definitely hadn't been applied for, and checks weren't being cut to businesses to keep their employees on the payroll. So it's amazing to me how 12 months later, not a whole lot is like physically changed, except for we have a vaccine. People should be more comfortable going back to work. People should be able to safely go back to work as more people get vaccinated. And we've gone from an abundance of applications to a shortage of applications. I'd just like to get your take on that. That's so. I mean, who would have thought a year ago that we'd be in this situation?
Well, we knew back when we started WorkHere in 2015, we were heading into an unprecedented period of time in the employment market where, for the first time in decades, candidates were going to be scarce. Usually it's the other way around. Screening is the rule. And all of a sudden we're switching from screening to selling people on why they want to work at your company. COVID was interesting because it's causing a huge migration of talent. People lost their jobs, or maybe they quit their jobs because they didn't feel safe. Whatever it was, there's a huge amount of change in the workforce going on where people, they had a different job this time last year, and now they're coming back into the workforce. I think we're going back to where we were a year and a half, or right before COVID hit, where we were at pretty much peak. We had maxed out employment. Unemployment was the lowest it had been since the late 1960s, I think. And we're going right back to that. And with an economic recovery coming, I think talent is going to be scarce, and people are going to be looking for more and better. And if wages were low before, that's not going to attract people, because they're going to have lots of options that they wouldn't have, because you're not the only company that's hiring. Everybody's hiring.
Right.
Makes a huge difference. So I think this next year is going to be something that most of us in the recruiting end of the world have never, ever had to deal with before.
I agree. And we've already started it, obviously. So let me ask you about, I know we're not in this situation now, but let's say we get back into the situation where we have more applicants than jobs. And one of the things that recruiters ask me for is advice on how to save time in the initial disposition of a candidate. So if you're talking to that candidate right after they apply, and you guys assess that they're not a good fit for the job, or they are a good fit for the job, how do you provide that feedback in the applicant tracking system or in any other way to the employer? Do you guys typically mark them as not a good fit, or kind of flag them to be more of a high quality candidate that should be followed up with sooner with the actual hiring manager?
That's a great question. We actually do a couple of things, and first caveat is every one of our customers is a little different because their hiring process is a little different. But what we often do with every candidate, whether or not they're qualified or not, we report back via the ATS. If we have a customer that has an ATS, you'd be shocked how many companies don't. Well, you're in the business, so you know.
I need that list, by the way.
Yeah, there's a huge number of companies don't have ATSs, but at the end of the day, we end up having to report back, okay, this candidate, they applied on Indeed, they weren't qualified, they were knocked out on this particular question. This is where they fell out of the process. So we provide that feedback to on every candidate, and we try to deliver that back into the ATS so it can become a part of the recruiting workflow. The makeup of what questions we ask a candidate really depends on the job and the employer. It's totally different for one company versus another. And you mentioned regulatory compliance. That comes into even the conversations that we have with candidates, and that there are things we're allowed to say and not allowed to say, and we have to make sure that we're doing that right. So that process varies, but we do love to report that stuff back to the ATS, because there's a lot of awfully great automation that you guys can do to save recruiters time. And the other thing too is if we're front loading the screening, we save the recruiters a ton of time. I think the research, and I'm not sure if it was in SHRM or ERE or where I saw the number, but it was 74% of a recruiter's time is spent on screening.
Right.
And we think that there's a lot better things that recruiters could be doing other than reading resumes and deciding whether this person's worth calling or not.
Yeah, screening is a great candidate for artificial intelligence / automation and augmentation, because it's almost like a decision support system. It's a series of yes/no questions, very even if there's screener questions that are open for interpretation, right? Like, tell me the last thing you taught yourself, or, what have you been doing with your life for the last 5 years? And you want to make sure that, this person's motivated. There are definitely, questions with finite answers that can be classified as right and wrong that you can answer before you get that candidate to a recruiter whose skills are better suited than just asking, knockout questions is what we call them. So, yeah,
I think there's a lot better things that for recruiters to do than ask knockout questions. And then there's another really important piece that needs to go on. What we find is depending on where the application came from, 13 to 22% of applications have bad data or wrong data on them or on the job seeker's profile. So if you get an application from Indeed, it's not Indeed's fault. The job seeker forgot to update that their CDL license expired. But it does affect your recruiting because you might have a perfectly good candidate. Their resume reports they don't have a license they need to have, and your ATS or your AI is going to go, oh, screen this one out. And if we put a little human intelligence to that, we go, this person probably wouldn't have applied if they weren't qualified. Let's ask them about that and see if they have it. And so a lot of times we see there's quite a few candidates that can be recovered early on if you apply a little bit, you get some human eyes on the situation. Right now, we're still better at that than the machines are by orders of magnitude.
Yeah, and that makes perfect sense. Now, I know you guys use a little bit of automation as well with your human interaction. So how did you guys find that balance where you use automation so that your team of humans can scale, but you apply that human touch right at the perfect time in the process?
Yeah, so I'll go back to an event that happened to us when we really got into doing human chat. We started doing chat. We thought a bunch of engineers over here. So we did what engineers do, and we go, oh, people want to do chat. You know what that means? AI and chatbot time. This is going to be fun.
Yep.
And we went out and spent about $500,000 building our first chatbot. And one day we kind of had this feeling it wasn't working very well. So we spent a day just watching what the chatbot was doing. And we had this lady apply for a job, never forget it. She applied for this job and goes, my mom has cancer. I really need a job. Can you help? And the chatbot did what chatbots do, and it responded. And it goes, all right, woohoo, let's go. What is your name? And then she goes, can you help me? What is your name? I need your first name to proceed. And we looked at that and go, this is really tone deaf. And so we decided we would shoot out our interns versus the chatbot to see who could get more candidates through to an interview. And the interns beat the chatbot, beat the AI by 3 times, by 300%. And we looked at that and go, you know what, maybe some of this AI stuff just really isn't ready for prime time, especially early on in the conversation where we do have these questions and we do have people that are trying to open up a relationship. People like to have relationships with people. So we try to get that interaction to happen almost right away. So if there are questions or there are things that somebody needs to express, we can have a human respond back to that. My mom has cancer kind of thing, and go, yeah, I would love to help you with this.
Sure.
Or, I'm really sorry to hear that. How can we help you? It's really about empathy. And that's the thing that we just haven't quite got good at teaching the machines to do is have emotions and be empathetic. So we try to do that almost right away. We do use automation for a lot of rote questions. So you look at a lot of knockout questions. Do you have this? Yes or no? Yeah, a bot can ask that question just fine. But what we want to do is have the humans have their eyes on it so that if somebody has an answer the bot is struggling with or can't answer, we definitely want that human chat agent to pick it up and help that candidate out so they can get through the process. A lot of things that seem obvious to us aren't really obvious to the candidates because they don't change jobs every day and they don't spend all day filling in employment applications, despite what we might think as recruiters, right?
Right. That's a great point. Whatever we all do every day, right, is typically not what most other people in the world do every day, even though everyone's doing something. So, and for a lot of people, it's what we've learned is, well, for some people, or I'll say a lot, it's hard to go look for a job, right? There's the fear of rejection. There's the fear of change. I mean, it's one of the major life change events that causes a lot of stress. And I guess my point is someone who builds up the courage to start that process, they're looking for the first roadblock to give them a good excuse to stop doing it, right? To bail out of it. And if you guys at WorkHere can not only take that blocker out of the way, but kind of like smooth the road out in front of them, that's a great idea. And I can't imagine it not helping the candidate feel better about applying to the job, and then ultimately, whether they're a good fit or not, leaving the experience with that employer with it as a good candidate experience. And we focus on that a lot in our job portals, the aesthetics of it. Everything needs to look nice, and then the interactions with people need to be nice as well. And next time someone says, I'm looking for a job, and they might say, you know what, I didn't get a job over at WorkHere, but when I applied, like I talked to someone and they were nice, and, give them a shot.
Yeah, one of the things that's been super surprising in all of this for me has been what happens when people fail to, they get screened out, when they fail to make it to an interview. When you're interacting via chat, you're able to ask them a question and tell them on the spot, oh, you don't meet the qualifications for this job. Maybe they're missing a license, or maybe they're missing some education. It's one of those, you don't meet the requirements for this job, but if you get this requirement, you can come back and we would love to talk to you then. Is that okay? We get in a tremendous amount of positive response, even to people that get rejected in the process. And I think a lot of it has to do with the fact the alternative is a vaguely worded email that you might get 2 months later that says, we didn't hire you because reasons.
That's a great point, right? Because let's say it takes 2 months to get a certification. I'm just making both of those things up, but for the purposes
Sure.
of this example, right? It takes 2 months to get a license to do something. It would be great to tell the candidate, you have everything but this license. If you go get it, we will hire you, because we always have 10 open positions and it's hard to find people with this qualification. That would never get said in a fully automated process or with a standard decline email from a tracking system.
No, and the problem we have, if you think so, why is it the way it is with a lot of hiring processes? It's because they're batching everything up, and by the time they get around to decisioning the candidate, the reasons are kind of muddled and not real clear. And when you're going through and doing knockout questions, it's really easy to provide feedback at that point, because it's like, okay, this is a hard requirement. You don't meet it. If you can meet this, we would love to talk to you about this job in the future. It really works well. I don't know that we'd ever promise somebody the job, if they got the qualification, but we surely would promise that we would talk to them again. Right. And it's amazing what happens. So we do a little customer sat survey after every conversation. And even on situations where people are rejected, we consistently, on a scale of 1 to 5, we see them answering at about a 4.8% or 4.8 star rate. So, they're very, very happy, even though they got rejected. I go back to the old mobile app we had. When we would ask quality questions, it would always bifurcate based on whether they got a job or not. If they got the job, they loved it. And if they didn't get the job, 1 star, you suck. So it's just different. And I think a lot of it has to do with immediacy, and to the degree that you can be transparent, providing some level of transparency so that the candidates understand, that if you want to be a truck driver, you really do have to have a CDL. If you want to be an RN, or you want to be a registered nurse, yeah, you do have to have an RN license. And, in some cases, yeah, a degree is absolutely required. And it's so important to have that immediate feedback. It really changes the game for the job seeker. They know what they're up against, and you're the one experience they're having where there's some certainty. Everything else, we're just taking an uncertain situation and making it more uncertain, right?
Right. Man, this is a great conversation. I'm speaking with Mike Seidle, the CTO and co-founder of WorkHere, and you're listening to RecruiterCast Live. We are going to take a quick break, and when we get back, we're going to talk about Indeed's algorithm change and possibly the effects of cannabis testing on all of the things that we've just discussed. So stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Make sure to check out RecruiterCast on social media: Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and Twitter @RecruiterCast. RecruiterCast @RecruiterCast @RecruiterCast.
RecruiterCast is brought to you by Brightmove, named the top talent management technology provider in HRO today. Learn more at brightmove.com.
You're listening to RecruiterCast Live. Make sure to check out all of the RecruiterCast episodes. Join the conversation today. Download and subscribe for free on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Play, and all major podcast platforms. It's time to get back to RecruiterCast Live. Call in now to join our panel to talk about the current state of recruiting and what may be in store for tomorrow.
And we're back. Don't call in now. We don't have to call in now anymore. But I don't have a producer to do a new ad. everyone's been listening to me complain about it. I can't hire a producer for the podcast, Mike. There's not that many applicants, and the ones we get aren't qualified.
This cracks me up because one of the early chat cases we took on. Tell me if this sounds familiar. We had a customer that was a little RPO out of Indianapolis, Indiana, and they came to us and go, "We need to find podcast producers of all things," okay. And we were wondering if you could help us do that. And we actually kind of prototyped our product on that particular requisition. It was a lot of fun, and we ended up finding, I think it was 38 candidates, and it was amazing how many podcast producers came out of the woodwork for that. There's a lot of them.
Well, and it's one of those jobs that working remotely is not possible, right? Because we need someone sitting here in the studio behind the controls, doing camera angles changes and adjusting levels and that kind of stuff, kind of as it goes. But
yeah, I think we went through several hundred applicants to get to that number of candidates. It was a lot of pretenders too. There was a lot of people that wanted to be a podcast producer when they grew up.
Yes.
So, yeah. But there was quite a few that were actually really qualified. It kind of blew me away. And it was one of the things that really got me going, hey, this chat thing, there might be something really to it. And we kept after it. It's
one of the things that we noticed that it was by accident, but the guy that we initially hired is a bass player in a rock band, and he was on tour, and he's like, hey, as long as you don't care, that I'm going to be gone for a couple months at a time. But and at the time we weren't doing live, so it really was just post-production of interviews like this. But as soon as touring stopped, all of a sudden there was a flood in the market of people that were audio engineers, really, really, really good audio engineers and musicians. All the music you hear on RecruiterCast Live, that was made here in the office, with people that work for Brightmove. And we were able to, do original music. We were able to do, get all the right tools and kind of get some talent that we otherwise probably normally wouldn't have been able to keep or hold on to. So one of those things where COVID kind of helped some industries by repurposing people from other industries. It was fun to watch. Not the situation, and you know what I'm saying. It was interesting from an industry standpoint. That's a better description of what I'm talking about. Okay, so about a month ago, we get a call from some of our big customers that do high volume hiring. 5,000 to 10,000 hires per year. And they're used to getting a lot of applicants from Indeed. And we say, we do what we always do as a software company. We go and look at our logs and we say, yeah, there's not errors. We're not missing applications. The ones that come in, we're processing. No one's changed your settings to weed people out. And we reach out to Indeed and we find out that they've changed their algorithm and how they promote non-paid jobs. Okay. And just to kind of set the table here, when Indeed first started, everything was free for everybody, and that included staffing companies and direct employers. And that's how they built their critical mass. And as soon as they had a need to monetize their revenue, they kept jobs for direct employers at no cost. But if you were a staffing company, you had to pay to post your job. And the people who reached out to us about applications being down, these are direct employers who were using this free service. And so they changed an algorithm so that the people paying for sponsorships, this is the way I interpreted it, are kind of more bubbling up to the top now, even more so than the direct employers. Have you guys heard this same thing? And what have you found out about the algorithm change, and how is that affecting this engagement, because every application is more valuable now that there's less of them?
So a little full disclosure before I go answer the question. We do have a partnership with Indeed, and we integrate directly with Indeed Apply. So when people apply for a job, we can chat with them.
Yep. Full disclosure. So do we, right? And we're not bashing them. We're simply talking about that the algorithm has changed. And just to be clear with our friends at Indeed, this is something affecting the industry that we should dive into.
It really is. We on organic, we definitely see it, have seen a disruption in flow, and it is down for a lot of our employers that count on organic flow into their ATS. We're definitely seeing some changes there. It doesn't surprise me, David, because before I started this company, I owned a digital ad agency, and I lived through Google going through the same exact process where everything was free, and then they've kind of ratcheted everything up. And now, if you really want traffic from Google, the best way to get it is to buy it.
Yep.
And I kind of wonder, long term in our industry, if maybe we're kind of coming out of a period of time where there's a lot of free, and now that there's a lot more demand for talent, what they have to provide to us, that used to be the job posts were the expensive part. Now the candidates are. So there's been a little switch in the value prop for our whole industry. And
Yep.
maybe one of the leaders to look at it, that was LinkedIn and what they did with their recruiter licenses. So I think some of this is just a big, gradual march towards an end where, if you want to access talent, it's going to cost something. A free lunch period might be kind of slowing down a little bit for everybody. But I also think that the algorithm changes just happened. What's so hard for the employers is that there's not a lot of clarity on why the change happened. It's just all of a sudden we're getting less candidates, and we set our budget around these numbers last year. And it's really frustrating. And for a lot of them, especially in manufacturing or in hospitality, where, they have cyclic budgets and that kind of thing, it's going to be hard because they're going to have to find money that maybe they don't have in the budget.
Yep. Yeah. Some of them had no budget, and now they're going to have to come up with something. And, I think it happened with LinkedIn maybe right before they got bought, but with Indeed, it seems to have happened after the acquisition, and maybe the pandemic prolonged it for a year. But yeah, as you know, if you're enjoying these services from these companies, and when they're in the startup phases and they're funded, they're going to do whatever they can to reach a critical mass and become a relevant tool that you're going to have to need, that is going to have sticky demand. But as soon as they get, scooped up by these companies who are really focused on making money, they're going to put really smart analysts on the problem of how do we monetize this platform? And then they're going to, right? I guess the reality is, like, they really don't care if you don't like that you're not getting free job applicants anymore, because the fact that you're not paying them kind of, that's not part of their new business model.
No, and the other thing that's really, David, the thing that's really, really changed, and this is, COVID kind of delayed this all from hitting for a year, I think, is that really the market had switched from being an employer's market to being a candidate's market 2-3 years ago. And that trend was accelerating. And so when I look at, what job boards have to offer, they have active job seekers that you can hire right now. And there's a lot of value there. And I think everybody in that business knows that the value is there right now. That whole industry really, it grew up during a period of time where talent wasn't scarce. And sure, we had jobs that were hard to fill, like software engineers and stuff like that. But on the whole, you drop a free job post out on Indeed, you get 80, 90 candidates every time, and life was great. Well, that doesn't happen now. And those candidates that are coming in are really, really important. They're much more expensive. And I think one of the things that most recruiting organizations need to think about is, how valuable is a candidate? How much do they cost? And really plan for the cost of those to accelerate over the next few years, because there isn't a scenario where all of a sudden we're going to have 15-20% more people in the workforce overnight. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point. And I think that there's going to be two budget adjustments that companies are going to have to make. The first one is paying for the job posting or for the resume views, however you want to look at it, the transaction of finding people that are qualified. And the second is I think they're going to have to pay more. I think jobs that have been paying $10 an hour are going to need $15. I think they might need benefits. I think if you're if you've been letting your employees work 22 hours or whatever the cutoff is in your state so that you don't have to provide benefit options or other vacation time, that kind of thing. This isn't a political thing. I think it's a free market thing that's happening right now. Now, I think that the free market is being affected by political decisions like unemployment extension and stimulus checks. I can't imagine how you can't say that a market is not affected by the injection of $1 trillion into it. Like that to me is not logical. Your thoughts on that?
Oh, I think you're dead on. The thing that's going on with unemployment and with, the whole COVID relief situation is that it's introducing this money that makes an awful lot of jobs not interesting to job seekers because they make close to that amount of money staying at home. And the solution probably isn't to take away that safety net right now because we're just not ready for it. But the truth is that as employers, what they're really showing you is what the future looks like. We're going to have to give people a compelling reason to go to work. And we're going to have to give them a compelling reason to go to work at your company. And that means you're going to have to be better and different. That's just the way it's going to be. There's less available talent than there used to be. And there's a lot of different social factors and different reasons it is that way. But probably the best thing to look at is to go, look, unemployment's going to be around 6-7%, maybe under 5, maybe under 4 in the near future. And as we hit those numbers, it's going to be harder and harder to keep the pipeline full. And you're going to have to increase wages and you're going to have to offer more benefits just to keep up with the Joneses.
Well, our hypothesis, I think, will get tested well in August. I think the last I heard, the last bill that was passed extended the benefits through August. So we'll see.
Yeah, we will. I'm really, I can't wait for COVID to be over. I mean, I've had enough of this, but at the same time, we all had to change what we were doing for COVID, and we're all going to have to really think through what's the world going to be like after, because it's going to be different. And the pandemic will have left a mark that will take decades to heal.
Yep. I agree with you from every way that I've looked at it and analyzed it. I don't see how it doesn't have a lasting change on a lot of things, including our industry. So un-COVID related is marijuana. And as we were, getting to know each other before we met today and did the interview, you mentioned that one of the things that is kind of a trouble spot right now is drug testing for a legal drug that used to not be legal, or that's legal in some cases but isn't legal all the time, depending on the state, depending on the employer. And I'll let you take it from here, but tell me a little bit about the problem where you're losing applicants based on maybe some antiquated drug testing language on your job application.
Yeah, we see an awful lot of, especially when we look at entry level and mid, kind of those jobs that younger people will take. We see an awful lot of policy that is stuck 3, 4, 5 years ago. I think Colorado changed their law 10 years ago and legalized pot back then. And there's a lot of companies that are still using the same kind of drug testing regimen and the same kind of policy that they had in place when marijuana was highly illegal. And it's not meeting the workforce where the workforce is, for sure. And what we see in a lot of cases is, if you have drug tests and you're disclosing that you do a drug test, there's a lot of questions candidates are asking us via chat about, well, what kind of drug test is it? What happens with pot? What happens if I use CBD oil? What happens if? There's a lot of uncertainty around it. And to be honest, up until recently, there was not a good way for an employer to buy a drug test that didn't include cannabis on it. And so what we're seeing out there is just a lot of confusion around, how do we meet the market where the market is, and how do how do we have some standards in our hiring, but not exclude everybody? And I think this is an area where almost every employer needs to really take a hard look and go, what are we really doing around marijuana? Is the, the jobs that we're hiring for, is somebody using pot on the weekends going to be a problem? If so, if it's not a problem, why are we testing for it? And on top of that, in some areas where it is legal, eventually the law is going to catch up and go, you guys can't discriminate because somebody's doing something legal.
Right. Yeah. There's two, I've thought about this, and there's kind of two areas I think that need to be resolved before the problem as a whole can be resolved. The first thing is that, just to be clear, marijuana is illegal as it's a controlled substance by the United States federal government.
That's right.
And until the Supreme Court or the legislature changes that, and there's a big debate on whether or not the 10th Amendment is being violated by it being a controlled substance, because that should be left to the states because it's not national security or I can't remember the verbiage that everything falls under. But basically the 10th Amendment says that anything that's not up to the federal government and falls within these constraints is up to the states. And the states have kind of said, you know what, it's up to us. So we're going to go ahead and take this into our own hands. And
they have.
And they have. And so employers, even in Florida or Indiana, who are doing business for the federal government in these states or in Washington, they're not going to be able to not test for these drugs, in my opinion. And so that's one thing, right? It's legal and it's illegal at the same time, depending on where you live. It's very cloudy, and probably everyone should err on the side of caution as an employer, right?
Yeah.
I'll let you go ahead and speak to that. And
No, I think you're right on, David. I just can't see, this is a really hard problem for a lot of the employers. What do you do? I mean, yeah, you got to test. You got a lot of great candidates that you maybe aren't accessible to you because they're going to fail the test. It is what it is. It's just hard. And it's one of those things that every employer is going to have to look at this and do something a little different. But boy, do we see a pretty profound effect on the number of candidates that stay in the pipeline when you ask them the drug test question. It's changed a lot over the last 2-3 years. And I think candidates are a lot more sensitive to it than they were in the past.
Well, and it's good to have the human interaction to say, yes, but we understand that there's circumstances. So let's talk about it if that panel comes back positive.
Yeah, that's been the big thing. Has been for us. It's been surprising how many employers are basically saying it's okay if you answer the question with these 2 or 3 different responses based on the situation. And we've had a few of them come back and say, the test that we're doing, we're actually ignoring the results on cannabis, but we are watching the results for other drugs. And I think that this is one of these areas we just all have to be pretty pragmatic about and realize everything's in a state of flux. I mean, all the legal stuff is way above my pay grade. I'm just a business guy out here, and the hard part for us as business people is those things really do affect us and affect our ability to hire people. And it just is one of those, I guess, problems of our day and age that we've all got to deal with, right?
Yeah, definitely. And so, all right, let's magically fix that problem, right? Federal and states agree on something, right? That happens often. So now you have the issue of when it's okay to use it. And my thoughts here, it's just like alcohol. Alcohol is legal, but you can't be drunk at work, right? You have workman's comp insurance, you have real accidents, you have safety concerns. There's different, we're not driving forklifts around the office here, but I've worked in warehouses where, any impairment at all, even cold medicine could be the difference in, someone getting run over or not. And the difference there is that if you're suspected of being drunk at work, your blood alcohol level is representative of your intoxication level at that moment. Whereas some drugs like marijuana, the existence of the drug in your bloodstream doesn't necessarily mean that you're impaired at the time. So you could potentially have this problem where there's an accident. Someone smoked pot a week before or the night before, and how do you justify that if you don't have an accurate way of testing impairment at the moment of the accident or shortly thereafter?
I think there's an awful lot of technology that's going to evolve to meet this kind of problem. I mean, that there's, I guarantee you, you said it, what's the old rule? If somebody thinks of it, there's 4 or 5 people starting a business around it right now.
Right.
I'm sure we're going to see a lot of the technology evolve to allow us to handle things like we do with alcohol, where it's kind of a known quantity and there are tests and kind of standard policies and all that. But until then, this is just one of those landmine issues we all run into in our hiring, and it's going to be challenging for a few years as the reality and the law and business practices all kind of get in sync with each other, right?
Yeah, I mean, and what you might see is, maybe right to work states solve this problem already. I have a personal experience with an employee I had several years ago, and came back from lunch, smelled like pot. I said, "You can't do that. Do it again, you're gone." Maybe I wasn't lenient or whatever, or maybe I was too lenient. I don't know. I felt like it was the right decision given the employee and the situation. However, I didn't need a test. I didn't need a reason other than no reason to terminate employment, because the laws in Florida are worded that way, right? The employee can leave at any time, and I can choose not to employ them at any time. Curious if Indiana has that law. I don't know how unique that is to Florida and other states. I know some states have really, really strong protection for employees, and it's almost impossible to get rid of them, even if they are not doing their job function.
Yeah, Indiana's a right to work state like Florida is, so a lot of things are very similar between those two states. As far as, at least that's my understanding of it. I'm going to say I'm not a lawyer because I'm not, but it's certainly easier for us in the right to work state than it is in some other states. But nobody wants employees that are endangering each other or even interacting with customers when they're intoxicated. It's not a good thing. But you go back to that whole testing question and everything. We've all got a new problem, and we're going to all have to deal with it coming out of the COVID era, because it's right now front of mind, and a lot of states right now are looking at changing their laws around marijuana. I believe that we had a member of Congress put out a little thing the other day about he'd like to see a vote on legalizing marijuana nationwide by this time next year. So, things are changing around that particular issue really quickly. And I think it's something that's going to affect all of our ability to acquire talent.
Yeah, it's I think it's a good time for employers to visit their employee handbook, which is usually kind of like it's the guide, right? It's the handbook to how you're supposed to behave at work. It's available to everybody. It applies equally to everybody. And in most offer letters or employment contracts, it says, hey, this is the contract. Not only are we going to pay you this much, and here's what you're going to, do loosely, and always refer to the employee handbook. And it's up to you to make sure that, you're up to date on what it says. So if you haven't revisited your employee handbook in a couple of years, make sure it's very clear on your policy towards substances that could cause problems at work. You probably already have an alcohol section. It's probably pretty inexpensive to pay an attorney to amend it to include either prescription marijuana or recreational marijuana, depending on your state's law.
That's a great suggestion. I can't tell you the number of times having a strong employee handbook has kept companies I've started out of trouble. So, big fan of that.
Yeah, it comes highly recommended from the lawyers for sure. They like to have rules, and they're good at these things. And a lot of them, I don't recommend the boilerplate templates. That's a good place to start, but definitely, don't just go grab somebody else's employee handbook and start using it as your own. But if you can get a template and then edit it so that it applies to your state and your company's culture and your mission, I think you'll have happier employers because they're kind of more at peace knowing how things work and what they're expected to do in certain situations. Like ours includes hurricane evacuation procedures. You probably don't need to worry about that up in Indianapolis.
No, we don't. We have a different kind of problem. We occasionally have tornadoes, so we have a section in our handbook about that. But
Yeah.
it's just so funny how we take that stuff for granted, and it's a bigger deal to the employees a lot of times than it is to management. So yeah, it's good stuff.
Yeah, if you can curb their anxiety of worrying about doing something wrong that would jeopardize their job, it's an easy way to do that. Mike, I think we covered everything that I wanted to talk to you about. Do you got anything else you want to close with before we sign off for the day?
Yeah, I guess I do have one little thing that I would really want to share with people, and that's when you're looking at your hiring process, put yourself in the candidate's shoes and ask yourself, do you really like this? If you haven't done this little exercise in a few years, do this. Try to apply for a job at your own company and see how you like the experience. I think that's something that everybody, I don't care if you're, in a big company and you're middle management, or you're an executive in a big company, or maybe you're the owner of a smaller one, it's well worth taking, a couple hours every year to find out what that employment experience is like. And then take that learning and have some really candid conversations with your team about it, because everything that happened to you in that process is happening to every applicant that your company has. And if you fix it, it can really be a game changer. But the only way you're going to find out what that process is to try it out. Yeah,
that's a great suggestion. I know firsthand that many people don't do that. And, you'd be surprised, like, hey, where's everybody? Why aren't I getting any applications to this job? And then it's broken, right? It just doesn't work, and no one's looked at it. And who knows, how some applications actually get through. If you're lucky, it breaks totally, so you see a clean cutoff. But the worst bugs are the ones where, there's some kind of HTML error that only happens on Firefox or something like that. So you get some candidates, but you're missing other ones, and you don't know that there's even a problem. But that's great advice. And anyone listening, I would encourage you to go do that right now. Just take 5 minutes. And if it takes more than 5 minutes, that's also a red flag.
The other thing, David, is I would tell people, if you're going to do this, go try to drive that process all the way to an interview. If you can figure out how to fool your recruiting team, so you can really see what the candidates really are experiencing. Because,
sure,
you're talking about that very top of the funnel where somebody put a lid on it with a software bug. That happens all the time. But you'd be amazed how often there's something going on later on down the funnel where we got highly qualified people and they're just running into a buzzsaw because of a policy mistake or because a bad question in the interview process. It's amazing what you'll find as you really look through your hiring process that way. It looks different outwardly than it does inwardly, for sure. Great advice.
All right, Mike, tell everybody how they can get in touch with you and or WorkHere if they want to learn more about your product.
Sure. So website is workhere.com. And if you want to reach out to me, I'm on LinkedIn. You'll find me, just look for my name, Mike Seidle, Seidle. It's a little weird spelling. And, if you want to email me, it's mike@workhere.com. Love to talk to you about anything to do with recruiting, even if it doesn't involve chat or the software that we do. We're here. We like to help.
Awesome. All right. Thank you, Mike. And as always, thank you for tuning in to RecruiterCast Live. And until next week, happy recruiting.
You're listening to RecruiterCast Live. Thanks for listening to RecruiterCast Live with your host, Dave Webb. Make sure to follow RecruiterCast on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and Instagram @RecruiterCast. Check out RecruiterCast on all major podcast platforms. Subscribe now.
RecruiterCast is brought to you by Brightmove, named the top talent management technology provider in HRO today. Learn more at brightmove.com.
Let's talk recruiting.